Welcome back, everyone. Today we dive deep into the depths of the internet to bring you the most spine-chilling, hair-raising Reddit stories ever told. So lock your doors, turn off the lights, and let's begin our journey into the top 6 scariest Reddit stories. Number 6. This submission comes from a Reddit user of the name Mr_Nightmare 420. He states, "About 2 years ago I moved into my new house in a small rural town in Florida. I'm now 17. For a year now I've been hearing things in the house. Yeah, the house is old, but this isn't some old house noises. No, it's far more than that. Like every time my parents and brother go out, I hear heavy footsteps in the attic. At night I hear heavy breathing like someone ran a marathon. Things around the house would move or go missing. Dishes will fly off the counter with no explanation. My German Shepherd refuses to go in the attic or in the basement. One night I came downstairs to get some water when I saw the dog standing at the top of the basement stairs growling and staring into the dark void that was the basement. I called out to him, but he kept staring. I walked over to him and looked in the direction he was looking at. I could swear I saw an outline of someone, but when I turned on the light there was nobody. It totally freaked me out. My brother couldn't find anything and just told me to go to bed." Now, people are probably going to say my house is haunted, but I think it's much more than that because our house was built 8.5 years before we moved in, and we are the first people to live there. It's been 3 weeks, and I'm beginning to have nightmares. My dog won't come into my room now and just stands at my door and whines. I will have nightmares of something attacking me, and I would wake up with scratches on me. I hear my mom's voice when she's not there. I thought I saw my dead sister behind me in the mirror in the bathroom. I'm scared. Should I call a priest? Number 5. Reddit user keto_deoxy_O writes, "Last month, I noticed that something is off with my boyfriend. He was being too nice recently, like cleaning up his dirty dishes and being attentive to my needs. I would have thought this was a good thing if only I haven't caught him waking up in the middle of the night and leaving the house. I tried waiting for him to come back, but I fell asleep after some time, and the next thing I knew, he was back in bed with me. That morning, it clicked on me like I found all the pieces to the puzzle. That's why he was acting so nice. And recently, I would admit that we haven't had some sex, and I thought he just wasn't in the mood. Now I know why. He was having an affair. I was furious and heartbroken. I told my best friend Natalie all about it, and she was as heartbroken as me. She kept asking if I was sure about it. I mean, what other explanation it could be? He'll be gone the whole night and he'll be back in the morning. What did he do? Buy some milk?" I said to her that I have a plan. I'm going to wake up before he does and catch him red-handed. My best friend just nodded and said that was a good idea. That night, my boyfriend prepared a nice meal for me, something he hadn't before, and I was mildly surprised. I pretended not to know anything about his infidelity, so our conversation went normally. However, when we finally settled back in bed, I had fallen asleep almost instantaneously. My sleep was so good that I wasn't able to wake up at midnight. I was disappointed with myself. How could I have slept on it? What's weird was in the following nights that kept happening to me. I couldn't wake up in the middle of the night. I also tried staying up all night, but at some point I would fall asleep. That is very unusual since I have been a night shift employee before, and I didn't have this kind of trouble of suddenly falling asleep. Sometimes I couldn't even remember what happened last night. My crazy brain thought maybe my BF was drugging me, putting something to make me sleep through the night. That's the only possible explanation I could think of. But then I asked myself, how did he know about my plan? My heart sank as I realized the answer to my question. Natalie, my best friend. I couldn't believe it. Why would she betray me? Is she my BF's lover? At this point, I was intoxicated with anger. I skipped dinner and only drank water from tap. I made sure none of my BF's drugs would reach me. My boyfriend was even persistent that I should eat or at least drink some milk. To me, that was a confirmation that he was indeed drugging me. I was about to confront him about his infidelity right then and there, but I felt a blunt force hit me at the back of my head and I was out. When I came to, I was tied up in bed and my BF was watching me at the corner of our bedroom. He was biting his lips and was pale as a sheet. "What is this?" I asked him. His eyes lit up when he saw me awake. He then ran to our living room and called for someone. My heart sank as I saw who it was. It was Natalie! I yelled immediately after seeing her. It was you! How fucking dare you! I shouted at her. Natalie asked me to calm down. It's not what you think, she kept repeating. I'm gonna kill you both when I get out of here. I kept trying to free myself, but to no avail. They used some of the thickest rope I've seen. Babe, listen to me, my boyfriend said. I'm not cheating on you, and certainly, Natalie and I have no romantic relationship. I get out of bed every night because I need to stay safe. Stay safe? I asked. Stay safe from what? From you, he answered quickly. What? Jace, it's near 3. We should get out of here, Natalie whispered. My boyfriend then took out a paint bucket and painted my hands and legs with red paint. I squirmed and yelled as he did it in a hurry. All the while I was thinking, who is this person? Is this really my boyfriend? How could he do all of this to me? As if he could hear my thoughts, he kissed my forehead and said, You'll understand everything tomorrow. I promise. Before I could reply, he and Natalie ran away, and I was all alone in our bedroom. I kept screaming for help, but I knew it was pointless. My mind was racing as fast as my heartbeat. My lungs felt like it was shrinking as I breathed for air. No, no, no. How could they do this to me? Why are they doing this? I kept trying to free myself, but I got exhausted at some point and lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was still in bed. But I noticed that the ropes that bound me last night were now roughly severed and my wrist burned like hell. As I looked around the room, I understood Jace. The floor, the walls, and the ceiling as well were full of red handprints. My handprints. Number 4. Reddit user specialist _ Result _77 states in this submission that her daughter went missing in the woods but showed up at her front door weeks later. The story goes, My daughter Kennedy is 13 years old, but she thinks like a wise grandma. She never causes any trouble and knows what's best for herself. She never needed help with anything, and she only relied on herself. It started to get really bad when she turned 10. Me and my wife, Lauren, thought it was cute when she wanted to do everything on her own, but it got out of hand when she would totally break down if we tried to help her. She never asked us for any help with school, never asked my wife for advice for boys like most preteens would. We got so worried when she stopped eating and lost 10 pounds because of how focused she was on school. Kennedy was our first kid at the time, so we had to ask around on how we can help her. The local parents had some basic ideas like going on a vacation or having a family game night every Friday. Me and my wife had already thought of these, but they never worked out in the end. Kennedy always found a way to think of school and work. We kept on asking the parents when one couple said, "Take her on a camping trip." Me and Lauren really thought about this idea. It would be a secluded cabin by a nice lake. It would be a perfect opportunity to have some family time without anything in our way. Little did we know that would be the worst mistake of our lives. So on June 28, 2013, at 9:45 a.m., we left for the cabin. Lauren's parents used to camp all the time before they died, so they left the cabin for her. Lauren was excited because she hadn't been there since she was 17. I remember the whole way there. It's hard to forget a day like that. The weather was great, the sky was blue, the wind was just right. We had a little party in the car, but of course Kennedy didn't want to join in. When we got closer to the cabin, the smooth road became gravel. When we got there, Kennedy immediately got out of the car and ran down to the lake. It was weird because Kennedy hated lakes because of how they were infested with bacteria and diseases. Me and Lauren unpacked the car while Kennedy sat down in front of the lake. "This is going a lot better than we planned," Lauren said, placing down her suitcase in the cabin. "I know. I think this was a good idea," I said as I was placing down the last of the bags. Lauren brought her stuff upstairs to our room while I took a look around. I've never been to this cabin before, so all of this was new to me. After an hour or two, Kennedy still didn't come inside. Me and Lauren didn't bother to bring her in before, because she looked like she really liked the outside, but it was getting dark, so I went outside while Lauren was cooking some hamburgers. "Kennedy," I yelled a little, "dinner's almost ready, so come back inside." No answer. "Kennedy?" I yell a little louder than last time. "Boo!" Kennedy comes up from behind me and scares the living shit out of me. "Oh my gosh, Kennedy, don't scare me like that." I'm holding my heart through my shirt. Kennedy grins and walks inside. Kennedy was way mature than this, but I brushed it off because maybe she felt more at ease out here. We had our hamburgers and went upstairs to go to sleep. Kennedy was happier and energetic, which is the total opposite from when she is at home. At home, Kennedy is sad and gloomy, and so tired. When Lauren finished brushing her teeth, I told her what happened when I was calling in Kennedy from outside, and of course she just said it's because of the change of scenery. But I had a bad feeling in my gut, but I was too tired to think much of it, so I fell asleep. I was first up, so I decided to make breakfast for a change. I finished cooking some pancakes and went upstairs to wake up the girls. I went into mine and Lauren's room, and she was sleeping so peacefully, I gently shook her to wake her up. "Rise and shine, breakfast is ready." Lauren smiled a bit and got up. I was on my way to Kennedy's room when a wave of a rotten stench took over. I almost threw up on the spot, but I had to swallow it back. I slowly walked up to Kennedy's door and opened it. Her window was open, and there was a dead deer laying on its side beside her bed. The deer was in shreds. The inside was on the outside. Its eyeballs were nowhere to be seen, and there were bugs all inside and out. I looked around and Kennedy was gone. I yelled for Lauren, telling her that Kennedy is missing. Lauren ran to Kennedy's room and held back a mouthful of vomit. She ran back to our room and quickly called 911. It took them 25 minutes to get to the cabin because we were literally in the middle of nowhere. They searched around the cabin and a little in the woods, but found nothing but a piece of clothing that Kennedy had on. We had to leave our things back at the cabin so that the detectives could do a search. Me and Lauren got asked questions like, "What were you doing when she went missing?" And stuff like, "Did she act different beforehand?" You know, like the ones on TV. We soon got released and went back home. Lauren fell ill a couple days after the disappearance, so I had to take more days off of work to take care of her. Lauren didn't eat and had many nightmares about Kennedy and the dead deer in her room. I got her into therapy 2 weeks after Kennedy went missing. I was worried about Lauren and the things she could do to herself. Lauren was progressively getting better after every session, and so she started eating more in result. We were having chicken Alfredo that night when we got a knock on the door. It was a soft knock that could have been mistaken for the wind. At first, that's what we thought, so we continued eating until the soft knock turned into a bang. We both jumped and stared at the door for a good minute, then I got up to check the door. I opened it slowly, the door, and then I saw her, Kennedy, standing on the front steps. She smelled disgusting and looked like she's been to hell and back. I quickly let her inside, and Lauren ran to her while sobbing on Kennedy's shoulder while squeezing her in a tight hug. I quickly called the ambulance and gave her a tight hug despite her smelling like a dead animal. When we got to the hospital, there were doctors outside already waiting for her with a stretcher. Kennedy was rushed inside while me and Lauren waited in the waiting room. It took about 25 minutes before a nurse came out and let us into her room. She didn't say anything while we were there. Even when the police came in and questioned her, she was silent. She was allowed out the next day because her cuts weren't that bad. On the way home, I took a quick peek at the rearview mirror to check up on Kennedy and found her already looking at me, no emotion in her eyes. I got startled and quickly looked away. When we got home, she immediately went up to her room and slammed the door so loud it made me jump. Me and Lauren were worried when she didn't come down for dinner. It was finally time for bed when I heard a thump come from her room. Me and Lauren rushed to her room and was shocked by what we saw. I don't have enough time to finish because of personal reasons, but please let me know if you would like to know more about this. Number 3. The title of this post is, "What's the Deal with My Nephew?" He's been staring at me for hours now, written by reappearing user keto_deoxy_o. I visited my brother's house recently because I needed to lie low from work. It's stressing me out, and I just need some time off of it. Instead of renting out an Airbnb, I decided to just visit my brother in the province and spend some time there for a while. My brother graciously let me stay in exchange for babysitting my 7-year-old nephew Caleb while they're away from their work. I am proud to say that I am good with kids, so I agreed. However, ever since I got inside their home, Caleb kept looking at me. At first, I shook it off as him being curious about the new guy in the house. But days went by, and whenever I passed by him or during lunch, He would look at me as if I'm a biological freak. One night I played a movie for us to watch while his parents were away, but instead of watching the film, Caleb was just staring at me for an hour or so. It seriously creeped me out that I had to excuse myself and leave him alone until his parents came back. I asked my brother if Caleb usually does that, and he admitted that he sometimes does that to strangers when they go outside. Despite this, my brother didn't see it as problematic since it's natural for kids to be curious. I feigned to agree, but really, what kid watches people like that as if they're trying to melt you with their stare? I tried opening up some conversations, and most of the time he would answer directly like yes or no. I couldn't bear his annoying attitude anymore, so I asked him up front, "Why are you looking at me like that?" He blinked at me, perhaps thinking how he would answer it with a simple yes or no. After a second, he uttered the longest sentence he ever said since I arrived. "Because I know your secret." My heart sank. "What did you say?" "I know your secret," he said again, this time a smile forming in the corner of his lips. I laughed it off. This kid knows nothing, I told myself. He's just playing some BS prank. I was about to walk away and ignore him when he said something else that made my skin crawl. "Anna says you should join her swim." Before I could ask him what he meant by that, he ran into his bedroom and locked himself up. My ribs felt like it was constricting my very own lungs as I tried to catch my breath. There should be no way he knew about that. Anna used to be my latest target from work. I broke into her home and found her while she was in the tub. I remember bashing her head on the corner of the tub first before fully submerging her face on the soapy water. I remember how she trashed around, spilling water all over her beautiful bathroom floor. How? How did my nephew know that? As I stood in front of Caleb's room, my hands formed a fist. I usually don't work for free, but I might make an exception today. Number 2. I've been seeing things by user, Jamerber0. Not for very long, only perhaps the past 2 or 3 months or so, I have been seeing things. Not seeing things directly, just quick spurts or flashes in the corners of my vision when my eyes are focused on something else. I will be reading a book or writing in a journal. That's a lie. I will be staring at my phone, only half absorbing whatever is displayed, and behind, above, or underneath it, I will momentarily see the quick and irregular pattern of a fly through the air. Usually only one at a time, nimbly and silently picking its way through the corners of my room into my bedspread until I try to focus on it, when it vanishes. Sometimes it doesn't vanish. Flies are not uncommon in my flat, especially in the summer. Tiny fruit flies that come up through the drains and feast on eggshell membranes or scraps of greening meat tucked in the corner of plastic wrapping or furry fruit stones sitting at the bottom of the trash. Too much food wasted, though not wasted if they can make some use of it, I guess. When distractions fail, I think about them disgustingly but gracefully diving through the kitchen air, down the sink, laying their eggs on the food debris caught beneath the plug. Their tiny, gelatinous larval maggots, with their tiny black heads, dragging themselves out of the plug, up the metal walls of the sink, and across the freshly but lazily cleaned kitchen counters. The quick metamorphosis of maggot to orange-brown husk, and the red-headed emergence of the adults to search for a molding dinner. The maggots crawl like blind, ravenous horrors, and the flies are unrestricted in their space, zipping and drooping wherever they want without worry, though I have managed to catch a couple with a flip-flop. Usually, I don't bother to catch them. I see them later curled up and dried on the windowsills, or caught up in the cobwebs of the few spiders I've deliberately not exorcised from my room for this exact purpose. While they can irritate and cause an uncomfortable laying down to bed, seeing them and having them not disappear like the other flitters is somewhat relieving. I've never had visions before, or hallucinations, and when the fake flies first started skimming around the corners of my focus, I was unnerved. Just a trick of the light? Or my eyes being overly tired? Or real ones I just lose sight of? I think I've come to terms with it now. They are in my perceptual peripheries, an annoyance and disorder of mind that dissolve when directly addressed or confronted. Maybe to acknowledge them head on and have them remain in sight would be further confirmation of this new psychological eccentricity that seems to have come about. But then, how would I be able to tell which were real flies and which were pure psychological mischief inflicted upon myself? It is already difficult enough to tell, as even the real ones are skittish and easily lost. On more than one occasion, my dreams have been infested with them, undulating waves of them pouring upwards through the shower drain, the sinks, the cracks in the skirting board, forming a brown, chittering ocean mash around my bed where I lie too afraid to move. It rises up to eye level, a horrible, flitting body of flies and maggots, crawling, searching with quick, jerky movements too fast to follow. It covers the flat and the floor and pushes towards my face, the tiny black maggot mouths reaching towards my lips. Sometimes it forms a face itself. Then I wake up, and they, some of them at least, are still there. I feel them sometimes too. A slight grasping tickle on the back of my leg, or the minute brushing of tiny-haired feet on my arm. I swipe them away immediately, but it is never easy to tell if the sensation was from a real fly searching for a sweaty, dank place to rest, or a wholly imagined figment. Living alone doesn't help. I have no one else to ask to confirm my suspicions, no one to assuage my fears, no one to share my growing worries with. I did tell one coworker about it when we went shopping for school supplies on a lunch break, that I keep seeing flies that aren't there. I even described one early night where I had lain down to bed, spied a larger fly against my ceiling, and then had a near panic attack when it seemed to vanish, and I was left stood on the bed searching with a plastic slip-on in hand, hunting for a good 10 minutes before giving up. I thought I'd sounded lighthearted, but when I'd finished, she was looking at me wide-eyed, fear etched into the corners of her mouth and disgust on her brow. After that, I decided not to mention it to other people. I never see them outside, only in the flat. Maybe there is too much to see outside, too many other things to be distracted by. I see real flies outside, of course, but even they are rarer and seemingly not as clinging or desperate as the ones in my place. I see other insects outside, fat, furry bees, horizontal, shining dragonflies, even quick, scuttling cockroaches. But it's only ever fruit flies in my apartment, and I suppose my head. Maybe as a further distraction, or maybe as a way of reasserting control over my own mind, I have started trying to actively will my imaginings into effect. If I see bugs when I don't want to, will I see them when I do? Sometimes I imagine gigantic flies that fill the whole room, unable to move much apart from quick turns left or right. Sometimes I imagine people, my mother or father, stepping slowly across the wood floor, or standing against the wall half bathed in shadow. But most often, for some reason, I imagine great spindly beasts with long grasping arms lurking in the shadows behind my bedroom door. I intentionally create them to be as disturbing as I can, perhaps in hope of shocking my cerebellum back into recognizing the fantasy of such imaginings. They are always long and always hunting, in poses like a predator stalking a meal through tall grass. They stretch back into the darkness of the kitchen, though I never see their entire body. Just what can be seen through the doorframe. Hunched, forward shoulders matted with coarse, dark hair, and a few thin, spidery legs. They lean through the doorway and peer at me from the dark, their faces large, white, and human. It seems they push their faces forwards out of the shadow to perhaps both see and be seen more definitely. Their eyes gleam with a dull yellow sheen, and they stare unblinking through the door gap with an intensely unnerving lack of emotion. They always wear a wide, frozen smile. They never enter the room, and when I picture them, though they do discomfort me, I do still sense an awareness of separation, a finite line between the reality of my darkened, empty doorframe and the crawling, massive beast residing solely in my head. With the flies, there is more ambiguity. Flies I think I have seen for real flit and skip between the external world and my perception, only confirming that for them, the dividing line is more blurry. But occasionally, on some nights when I imagine one of the beasts at my door, its slender, skulking frame and gnarled shoulders emerging from behind the wood paneling, its sharp, rough patches of hair waving very lightly underneath the air conditioning, its round, wide-eyed, smiling face assessing mine with silent conviction. On those nights, just barely, almost as if a mere wavering of vision, I could swear I see the door be pushed slightly further open. Number 1. Reddit user 1000 and Onanites, the new neighbors. My wife Lori and I both agreed that we liked the young couple who had moved the next door. They had been there for a couple of months now, quiet, polite, respectful folk, keeping themselves to themselves. Lori took over a freshly baked pie early on, and although the pie was received graciously enough by the wife, she didn't invite Lori in. "Those folk want to keep themselves to themselves, I told Yal," I remarked to Lori, who can be a bit of a busybody. A few days later, the husband brought back the pie dish filled with Famer Market cherries, big glistening red fruit. He stood on the doorstep, and that was that. The weather was turning warmer, and we would see them in the garden more frequently. We'd nod and pass the time of day, chatting for a couple of minutes across the tall fence. They were always together, their arms looped in with each other, close and loving. I remembered the days Lori and I would go about like that, glued to each other's side, but Lori said he came off as clingy. "Oh, stop it, Lori," I said somewhat irritably, "always finding fault with people." "She never comes out by herself," Lori replied. "Haven't you noticed? He comes out sometimes and they go out together, but she's never by herself." I shook my head, unwilling to continue, but not Lori. "Honestly, this work from home stuff has made people mental," she went on. "It's not natural, husband and wife cooped up like that. Men need to leave the house first thing in the morning, return at evening." I raised my eyebrows at her. "Look at my little feminist talking," I teased. Lori goes on a lot about the pandemic and what it did to families, and I just wanted to forget about everything. But maybe it was Lori's remarks that the next sunny afternoon I spotted them across the fence. Doing their yard work, I found myself paying more attention to them. "Hi there," I called out to the young woman, bent over the soil. She straightened up, startled, but then calmly walked over to me. "What are you going to plant?" I asked. She smiled and spoke in a normal, friendly voice. "I have such a soft spot for roses." She looked hard at me. Her husband was walking quickly to join us. "Hello, sir." He greeted me cheerfully enough, but I couldn't take my eyes off the young woman's face. The way she was blinking rapidly, closing and opening her eyes deliberately. Lori came up, and we talked gardens for a minute. Then they made some excuse and walked away. "You must have noticed that," whispered Lori, barely able to wait until we were out of earshot. "What?" I replied. "Her eyes," Lori exclaimed. "The way she moved her eyes. I'm telling you, something is going on over there." "Nonsense," I said. "You're watching too much Netflix. You're going to tell me she's a ghost of a dead woman next." That night my sleep was haunted by the face of a young woman, her eyelids fluttering deliberately, long and short flutters, talking about roses with her lips, but saying something else with her eyes. Memories of my boyhood books came back. Long, short, 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 long, tap, tap her eyelids. "It's Morse code Lori." I woke up, drenched in sweat. She was trying to tell us something by blinking in Morse. Lori sat up and we stared at each other in the dark. We didn't see them for a few days, enough that we speculated if they had gone away for a while. The one late afternoon, as we sat on our deck trying to enjoy the sun, they came out, the husband carefully leading the wife by the hand. She was taking tiny hesitant steps behind him, a large floppy hat covering most her face. We stood up and waved. The husband said loudly, "Darling, Lori and Henry are in their garden waving at us. Shall we walk over to say hi?" She nodded, and they began walking very slowly towards the fence. And as the four of us gathered at the fence, we saw that the narrow bandage running across her face where her eyes had been, now only delicate hollows in the pristine white gauze. If you have any suggestions for future videos, please let me know in the comments. Stay safe and always remain curious. Thank you.